Hi, my name is Jared Mathena, and I'm going to be tying a double deceiver for you guys. It's a very simple fly pattern. It is a very good pattern to teach you how to utilize various different materials, Schlappen, Bucktail, and some other aspects of articulating a fly. And we're going to go ahead and go through that. But first, I'm going to give you a material list rundown. Of course, we're going to be using Bucktail. We're going to be using olive and yellow skein to start with. There's going to be some flash in there. Along with that, underneath the Bucktail, we're going to use polar chenille. I'm using the gold one. And then from there, the other material we're also using is tail feathers, which will be Schlappen. I like the Schlappen a lot because it grabs the water and it'll flop around a little bit. It just adds more movement. So, alright, let's get to it. We're going to be using a Gamakatsu B10S hook. This is a size 1. So we're going to build a thread base. And we're going to get back here to almost over the hook point, just past the bend. Alright, I'm going to advance my thread forward a little bit, and I'm going to go to flash at this point. So I generally like about somewhere in the neighborhood of a dozen strands of flash, because when we fold it over, it's going to turn into 2 dozen. Alright, so we got what we want there. Let's fold it over the thread, pinch, grab it on one side, a couple wraps, hold it in place, fold it over. Alright, so we're going to lock that down. Alright. That's going nowhere. Now we're going to use our Schlappen feathers for the tail. I like using that double folding over your flash. Gives you a nice distance for proportions of tail feathers. Alright. That's pretty good. Gonna get this other guy in here. Let's get that straightened out. Alright, now that we got that where we want it, we're going to lock that down in place. Okay, so now we're going to put our underbody in, which is going to be the gold. There we go. Oop, tangled up. So we're going to put in our gold polar chenille. At this step, it just depends upon the size of hook you're using and how big of one you're doing. I prefer roughly around 7 wraps. Three, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we'll just catch that, put that in place. Alright, so at this point we're going to put in our bucktail. Our butt ends are going to be facing this way, and our tips are going to be facing this way. So let's get that stuff tied in. So we're going to be wanting maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of pretty close to a number 2 pencil worth of hair. That's kind of a roughly similar length. Alright, we're going to gauge how long that is. That's a pretty good length, about, third to half of your tail feathers. So we're going to pinch, trim, Okay. Flip our hook over. Put our hair in place. Couple thread wraps and seal it in there. And we're going to just kind of make sure it's all on the bottom. There we go. That ain't going nowhere. So, put a little dab of super glue. Just kind of helps keep everything locked where you want it to, and adds a little bit of durability to the fly. My applicator's nice and crazy. Got a little bit on my eyelet there. Okay, now we're going to do the top color, which will be olive. We're going to do a equal proportion amount of olive to the yellow. Let's kind of size it up roughly. Okay. Keep it on top, thread wrap, lock it in place. Good amount of tension. Make sure our thread wraps behind the eyelet are relatively even. Gives this a nice clean head. I don't know if you were able to see that there. When I applied tension with the thread, that hair wants to flare out. What that does, leaving this hair behind here, is it acts like a pillow. So when you fold your hair over, it's going to get propped up by this and help give you profile. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to get in here, fold all this hair back. And it's at a good point, so I'm not crowding my eyelid too much. I tend to like my materials really close to my eye. So all we did was we folded everything over, and you can see I don't have a lot of tension, it's just sitting on there right now, but what we did was we just folded everything over, and we're going to put our thread wraps roughly, we'll say 1/8 of an inch, maybe 1/4 of an inch away back from the eyelet. So I'm going to undo that, get that good and tightly pulled back. And I'm just going to sink those thread wraps in there. Build a nice little thread layer. See if maybe I can catch some of those little stragglers. There we go. Whip finish. It's not really a whip finish I'm worried about being super clean per se, so I'll just use my hands. And we're going to trim. And at this point, you want to seal these threads so they don't ever come undone on you and your fly unravel. So I'm going to get in here with some really thin UV resin. It's going to penetrate those threads real good. And lock it in place. UV light. Alright, so that's the back hook. Alright, let's set that guy down for a second. We're going to go to our front hook. Okay, so from here what we're going to do is we're going to attach our articulating wire. There's a lot of different wires that you can use to articulate with. I prefer multi-strand. You can use coated, uncoated. Some guys will even like to use just mono. I don't prefer to use braid because it's too soft most of the time and it will foul hook a lot. Some people like it, it's just not my forte. Alright, so we're going to use some beads here to make our articulation joint. Slide over. I'm going to use 3, you could use 2. If you wanted to, you could use 4, however, it's all preference. I like 3. Sometimes I'll use 2 if I'm using a smaller variation of the pattern. So that's on there. Alright, lay that down. Alright, let's build a thread base on this hook. Okay, once again, thread base down the shank, getting up here towards the bend, just a smidge past the bend. There we go. Okay. I'm going to get my wire all straightened out here. Just get it captured. Now here's the big thing with articulating a fly. You want this loop right here to be nice and vertical with the hook bend. That helps your fly track. Hold it in place here. That helps your fly track more evenly, because if it's tilted, it's going to want to swim a little more wonky and funky. So we're going to get this straightened out here again. Apply some tension. A little more tension to adjust it. That's pretty good right there. Yep, I'm happy with that. Alright, so I'm going to wrap my thread over the wire for up to about maybe 3/4 of the hook shank. Doesn't have to be perfectly consecutive wraps. At this point, take my wire, I'm going to shove it down through the eyelet. So I'm going to pull it in. And I prefer this way of articulating. I just like the durability factor of it. You can do it other ways, and a lot of people don't have problems. I've done it this way a long time. I've never had a problem. Never had wire pull out on me before. Alright, so we're going to kind of use our thumb, just push it all back so it gets it nice and tight into the eyelet. Capture it, thread wrap, and seal it in place. And this is where I start wanting to do really good, tight, consecutive wraps. Get that guy out of my way. Alright, we're getting to the danger zone here. Right in here, where the tips of the wire is, it's very sharp, where you cut it with your dikes, or your wire cutters, or whatever. Right there is where it's very sharp. So what you want to tend to do is take really light thread wraps in this area, just kind of build a little thread bump, and that just gives you something to secure over. Alright, we're going to flip her over, get right back here, roughly to right here. Okay, so at this point you can do a lot of different things to help your fly not have this void. I generally just use flash. If you wanted to, you could use a few wraps of marabou of a relative color to whatever color scheme you're using. Whatever you want to do, you want to have something in here so you don't look like you have two different flies. Unless that's what you're going for, then by all means. But for the most part, a good fly that just has good fluidity, I guess that's a word. If not, I just made it up. But you just want the fly to really look like one solid fly. That's what we're going to go for. So I like to use flash again. I'm going to get about a dozen strands or so, roughly. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold my flash over. I'm going to trim it. And what we're going to do here is once again fold it over our thread, pinch, catch it there. That locks that in place. You can kind of use your thumb if you want to manipulate it around a little bit. And what we're going to do is fold it over. Missed one. Catch that. And we'll just kind of flare that all around a bit. Okay, so that gives you some material to help kind of join the flies together. Like I said, you could use some really short Schlappen feathers, you could use marabou, you could use something. You don't want a lot of craziness going in there because you don't want to build too much bulk or gob up that portion of the fly. Alright, let me get back to my polar chenille, sorry. Too many chenilles with P at the beginning. Alright. So we're going to tie this in. Advance our thread. And I'm probably going to use somewhere in the neighborhood of about 10 wraps of this stuff. I had a knot in it. There we go. 1, 2, 4. Stuff will tangle up on you real quick if you're not careful. That looks good enough. Okay. Alright, so that locks that all down in place. A little side note, if you wanted to have weight in your fly, before we would have done all this, you could have added a tungsten cone. I think I got one running around here somewhere. There it is. You could have added a tungsten cone on your hook, and you would be able to let it sit. Run away. You could have a tungsten cone. I don't know if I'm able to see that with how I'm holding it, but you could have a tungsten cone sitting here, and you could affix it in there with your material to where it'd sit behind your bucktail, and you would have a good weight integrated into your fly. If you're not a fan of a skull up front, I like the tungsten cone method because you can maintain all that bulk from reverse tying the deer hair, bucktail, sorry, reverse tying the bucktail, and you still have weight, and it just works. I like it. I'm not a big fan of gluing those little eyes on fish skulls, and I just like maintaining that profile as much as possible. So let's go ahead and get this head tied in. Bucktail ran away. Alright. So we're going to use just a little bit more yellow than we did in our back hook. Again, we're going to the head. Most of the front head portions of a bait fish, which we're imitating, usually have a wider head, and they taper down to a narrower tail. Okay. Let's get at least a good quarter of overlap over our previous hook. I'm going to get some of those butt ends pulled, match those up a little bit. Let's trim that. That's pretty good. So I'm going to come in here, this bottom portion. Looks like I got some scragglers in there. Let's see if, yeah. Okay. Alright, so there's our bottom color. And then what I'm also going to show you on this front hook is you can stack colors. So we're going to go ahead and add our green. Okay, let's get our color in here. That's roughly the right length. So I'm using a little bit less of the green because I'm going to add a color underneath. We're going to stack colors. Alright, I'm going to take some tan. It's a good color to throw in there. That's good. Maybe just a pinch longer than the olive. Okay. I'm going to disperse that around the top there a little bit. Okay. So I got tan, olive, and yellow. And when you flip it around on the other side, you're going to have that nice little hint of a additional color in there. So let me throw this back. I want it just a little bit closer to the eyelet. There we go. It's going to flare nice and good. Thread wrap over, lock it in place. Alright. So we're going to whip finish. Alright, at this point we're going to add eyes. I like to use a UV resin and a transparent backed eye versus like a holographic back that has a tape on the back end that's a solid, doesn't let light penetrate through it. So we're going to put a nice little dab of UV resin in there. I'm using these Blue Radiance MFC eyes. So we can just go in here, set that on there, get it where you want it. All you have to do is hit it with the UV light and that'll cure in there. Alright, just let that cure a little bit better. Alright, that eye's on there. So we're going to do the same on the other side. Excuse me. Kind of line those up a little bit. Get it where you want it. Hold it in place. Hit it with the UV light again. And that'll cure in place there. And then at this point, I like to add some UV glue around the eyes. Works as a nice buffer. That one didn't really lay down like it usually does. Let's move it. We'll let that wiggle in there some. I don't think I used enough glue on that one. So what we're going to do is just hold that in place. We'll let that cure again. There we go. That hasn't held. Alright. So we're going to do the same thing again. I'm going to bring my UV glue all the way around and encapsulate the eyes. Alright, so that glue is gonna coat the eyes, and they're gonna be buried underneath all that UV, and they won't go nowhere. Kind of spread it around a little bit more evenly. Rotate it so it doesn't try to droop to one side on you. And then we're just going to cure it. That's it, and cure. We'll get a nice little amount of time to cure through. And that's that. You have yourself almost like those plastic fish skulls, but it's entirely coats your eyes. They're not gonna get nicked or fall off as if you just super glued them on. So those aren't gonna go nowhere. You got a nice little bullet head, and depending upon how much hair you use in the forward portion, it'll almost work like body tubing, and it'll help your fly swim a little bit, deviates the water. So that's how we tie a double deceiver. And thank you for watching. Take care.